Ever wondered how experienced knitters get that vibe of having it all figured out? They don't get it from learning super advanced ways to manipulate stitches. Rather, this confidence comes from understanding simple things about yarn, stitches, and the structure of the knitted fabric. We've already discussed the most important knitting skill. If you missed that tutorial, follow the link in the description to catch up. In this video, I'll share with you 5 tips that will help you become a more confident knitter. When you turn your work to start a new row, make sure the working yarn is hanging down at the bottom of the needle. Don't place it over the needle like this, because then the first stitch, it seems that the first stitch has 2 strands there, and you might think that these are 2 stitches, and you might start working through each strand to make a new stitch. And as a result, you will add an extra stitch at the beginning of the row. And if you're working in a stitch pattern that has a pattern repeat, that will completely mess up your work. Don't make your stitches too tight. They should be loose enough to easily move on a needle, like this. If you feel that you struggle every time as you get into the stitch, that means your stitches are too tight, and you can control the tension by pulling on the stitch like this. Pull it a bit sideways when you make a new stitch to make it a bit bigger, and then take the slip the original stitch off the needle. And when you start making a new stitch, don't pull the yarn like this, because that will tighten the previous stitch. So keep the stitch as loose as it is. So the yarn, see, the yarn is not tight, it's not, I don't pull on it. And when you make a new stitch, simply wrap the yarn around the needle, pull it through. Then if you feel that the stitch is too tight, pull it a bit sideways to make the stitch looser and let it go. This way you will feel comfortable when you knit, and you will have a nice tension. In most cases, it is very important to know where the right side of the work is. If you're working in stockinette stitch or other stitch pattern that has sides that are different, clearly different one from the other, right? So the stockinette stitch wrong side looks very different from the right side. You have to remember where the right side is for just a few rows until you get the pattern established. But what to do if you're working in a stitch that doesn't have a wrong side, right? That has whose sides look exactly the same, like seed stitch right over here. What to do then? The best way to keep track of the right side is to insert a locking stitch marker at the beginning of the first row. So when you turn your work, let's say you cast on stitches, you turn your work and you know you're about to start your first row, that's when it's time to put the locking stitch marker in here right away. And this way you would know. So when you turn your work and you see the stitch marker here, you know you're about to work the right side row. If you don't have a locking stitch marker, a safety pin will do too, even a paper clip, something that will mark where the right side of the work is. If you're working in ribbing, seed stitch like this swatch over here, or any other stitch pattern that has knits and purls in the same row, remember to bring the yarn to the back of the work before you knit a stitch, and then bring it to the front of the work before you purl a stitch. That might seem really obvious, but I've seen quite a few beginner knitters struggling because they don't move the yarn before they purl a stitch. So remember, bring the yarn to the back before you knit a stitch, bring the yarn to the front before you purl a stitch, and that will save you from a lot of frustration. Of course, it's better not to put the work down until we finish the row, but you know, it's life. So sometimes you have to just put the work down and go do other things. And when you come back to your work, how do you know which way to go, whether to go this way or whether to go that way? In this case, remember one thing, the yarn always comes from the right. So the yarn should be attached to the stitch that is on your right needle. So if you find your work like this, and you see that the yarn is attached to the left needle, don't start working. Flip your work first, and when the yarn is at the right, then you continue working on your project. To better remember these tips when you work on your projects, download the free ebook of my top 15 tips for beginner knitters. In addition to the 5 tips we've just discussed, it has 10 other tips that were not mentioned in this tutorial. The ebook is free. Click the link below to get it. Thank you for watching this video and have a wonderful week. I'll see you next Thursday.